You ever get that look from your Havanese? You know those big eyes staring up at you like they're trying to tell you something?
Oh, absolutely.
It's like they're speaking a secret language, right? And we love them for it, but wouldn't it be amazing to actually understand what's going on in those furry little heads?
Absolutely.
Well, today we're diving deep into the fascinating world of Havanese communication.
Yeah, it's more than just those adorable puppy dog eyes.
So much more. We're talking about their barks, their movements, even those little ear twitches, and how you can decipher it all to build an even stronger bond with your Havanese.
It really is amazing when you start to understand the subtleties of their communication. You know, it's like a whole new level of connection opens up.
Absolutely. And we've got a lot to cover, so let's jump right in with, well, the most obvious form of communication, barking. Now, we've got some research here from Dr. Karen Overall, a veterinary behaviorist, and she points out something interesting about Havanese and barking.
Okay.
They're not known for being excessive barkers like some other breeds, but when they do bark, it's often for a very specific reason.
Right. They tend to be a little more, shall we say, discerning with their barks.
Exactly. It's not just random barking for the sake of it. It's usually very deliberate and meaningful.
And often rhythmic, too, you know?
Oh, tell me more about that.
Well, you'll hear this pattern a lot with Havanese. It'll be like, rough, 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 pause, rough, rough, rough. Almost like they're sending a coded message.
Fascinating. So what are they trying to say with this rhythmic barking?
It's usually their way of sounding the alarm, getting your attention. It's like their version of a canine security system.
So it's like, hey, something's up. Pay attention.
Exactly. They've noticed something out of the ordinary, and they want to make sure you're aware of it, too.
Okay, that makes so much sense. And then, of course, on the complete opposite end of the barking spectrum, there's that joyful, high-pitched bark that's usually accompanied by a full-body wag. You know, the one they do when you walk in the door after a long day.
Ah, yes. The welcome home bark.
Music to every Havanese owner's ears, right?
It's pure Havanese enthusiasm, no doubt about it. And it's interesting because while we often talk about excessive barking as a potential problem, this type of excited barking is actually a great sign.
It is. It's like they're saying, I'm so happy to see you, in the most enthusiastic way they know how.
Exactly. Pure joy. But, you know, barking isn't the only way Havanese communicate. They've got a whole range of vocalizations that most people don't even realize are forms of communication.
Oh, absolutely. And I think one that we've all experienced at some point is the whine.
Yes, the infamous Havanese whine. It can be a bit much sometimes, can't it?
It can be, but trainer Patricia McConnell, whose work we'll be referencing throughout this deep dive, makes a really important point about whining. She says it's not always a bad thing.
Right. It's easy to get frustrated, but we have to remember that whining is often their way of saying, hey, pay attention to me, I need something.
So it's not necessarily that they're trying to be demanding or manipulative.
Exactly. It's more like, excuse me, but I'm hungry, or I really need to go outside right now. It's communication.
It's all about figuring out the message behind the whine, right?
Exactly. And responding in a way that's thoughtful and consistent.
So we're teaching ourselves to decipher those whines. Now, here's one I bet a lot of Havanese owners have heard but might not even realize is a form of communication. That adorable little groaning or grumbling sound they often make when they're super relaxed.
Oh, absolutely. It's like a contented sigh.
It's the cutest thing, like a little rumbling engine of pure happiness. And Patricia McConnell, who we mentioned earlier, she actually points out these sounds as often overlooked signs of pure Havanese bliss.
It's true. They're so relaxed, so at ease, that they just let those adorable little grumbling sounds slip out. It's precious.
So if you're ever lucky enough to have your Havanese snuggled up next to you making those funny little grumbling noises, consider yourself complimented.
Absolutely. It's a sign of pure contentment and trust.
Okay, but before we move on from vocalizations, we have to talk about one more, and it's a classic Havanese quirk. It's the chuff.
Ah, yes, the Havanese chuff. It's like a little puff of air, like a quiet snort.
That's so cute. What does it mean?
It often means they're feeling playful. The American Kennel Club even lists it as a breed-specific trait. Like their way of saying, come on, let's have some fun.
Okay, so we've talked about those adorable Havanese sounds, but now let's move on to their body language.
Right.
Because, as you know, dogs communicate so much through their movements. And
I know,
Havanese,
experts at it.
they really are. I swear they could win an Oscar for all the emotions they can convey with just a wag of their tail or a playful little prance.
Absolutely. And that actually brings us to one of the biggest myths we need to debunk about dog communication. The idea that a wagging tail always equals a happy dog.
Yeah, if that were true, my Havanese would be the happiest dog on the planet
Right.
because that tail is going nonstop.
Right. And this is where canine behavior expert Stanley Coren comes in with some really fascinating insights.
Okay.
His research actually shows that there's a whole language of tail wags.
Really?
Yeah, so that high, fast wag, for example, it's not always just pure happiness.
It's not.
No, it can sometimes be a sign of excitement, maybe even a bit of assertiveness, depending on the context.
So it's more like they're saying, hey, look at me, I'm over here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas a low, slow wag, especially if it's paired with other signals like a tucked tail or kind of a lowered body posture, often indicates insecurity or anxiety.
Oh, that's so interesting. So it's like with so many things in dog communication, it's all about context.
Context is everything. You have to look at the whole picture, not just one isolated signal.
So true. Now, speaking of playful signals, have you ever noticed how your Havanese will often do that adorable play bow? You know, where they stretch their front legs out, rear end in the air like they're about to take off running?
Oh, the classic play bow. It's like a universal invitation for fun in the dog world.
Right. And Havanese, well, with their playful nature, they've practically perfected the art of the play bow.
They really have. And it's hard to resist, isn't it? I mean, how can you say no to that?
I know. Forget puppy dog eyes. It's all about the play bow. But let's not forget about those signature Havanese moves. You know what I'm talking about. The Havanese dance, that hilarious hind leg stand they do, front paws waving in the air.
Oh, the Havanese dance. It's their way of saying, look at me, I'm here, and I'm adorable.
It's like their party trick.
Exactly. And let's be honest, it usually works.
Oh, every time. They're like furry little attention magnets when they pull out that move. But let's not forget about those expressive Havanese ears.
Right.
Because as subtle as they might seem, their ear movements can actually tell us a lot about what they're thinking and feeling.
Absolutely. And again, it goes back to context, like Dr. Coren was saying. But generally speaking, forward-facing ears, especially if they're perked up and alert, signal curiosity and interest.
They're tuned in, paying attention to what's going on around them.
Exactly. But if you notice, their ears are pinned back against their head, especially if it's accompanied by other signs, like a tucked tail or lowered body posture. That can be a sign of fear, anxiety, or even submission.
They're feeling a bit overwhelmed. It's like a little timeout signal.
Exactly.
Okay, but we can't talk about Havanese communication without talking about those moments of pure Havanese joy.
What do you mean?
The Zoomies.
The Zoomies.
Yeah.
Because when a Havanese gets going, it's like watching a tiny furry rocket blast off.
It really is. It's this sudden burst of frenetic energy.
Yeah.
Running in circles, leaping in the air like they've just discovered the secret to unlimited energy.
FRAPs.
Yes. FRAPS, frenetic random activity periods.
Love it.
Yeah.
But technical terms aside, I think we can all agree that Zoomies are one of the most entertaining and endearing Havanese quirks.
No, absolutely.
But for anyone who's ever witnessed their Havanese suddenly transform into a furry tornado,
Yeah.
you might be wondering, what's the deal with those Zoomies?
Right. Well, the good news is they're totally normal.
Thank goodness for that.
And in most cases, they're a sign of pure happiness and excitement. It's like they've just bottled up all this energy and then boom, it explodes in this flurry of happy chaos.
Exactly. And veterinary behaviorist Dr. Karen London, you included her work in the materials for us, right? She explains that Zoomies are just a way for dogs, especially high-energy breeds like Havanese, to release pent-up excitement or stress, or even just, pure joy.
It's like their version of a really good workout.
Right. A way to de-stress.
Exactly. So if you ever find yourself laughing hysterically as your Havanese tears around the house like a little fluff ball possessed, don't worry.
Totally normal.
It's all good. They're just having a moment.
Exactly. Just let them get their yayas out.
But while Zoomies are usually a sign of pure joy, it's important to remember that Havanese, despite their playful nature, are also a sensitive breed.
Yes, very much so.
They can experience anxiety.
Overstimulation.
All of that, just like any other dog.
Absolutely.
And it's so important for us to be able to recognize the signs.
It is, yeah, because they have this incredible capacity for both, boundless energy and deep sensitivity.
It's quite a range. So how can we tell when a Havanese is feeling a bit overwhelmed, maybe even a little anxious? What should we be looking out for?
Well, you might see them kind of crouch down, tuck their tail between their legs, lower their head. You might also see some lip licking, yawning, when they're not tired, or even avoiding eye contact.
So it's almost like they're trying to make themselves small and inconspicuous.
Exactly, hoping nobody will notice them. It's like they're saying, hey, I'm not really feeling this situation. I need a little reassurance.
And that's our cue as their humans to create that safe and comfortable environment for them, right?
Exactly. Just understanding those little signals and responding in a way that helps them feel safe.
That makes sense. Now, overstimulation is something that we hear about a lot with Havanese.
It's common.
It is, and it's something we really wanted to make sure we dug into today. It seems like it can happen pretty easily with this breed, especially in really busy or chaotic environments.
You're right. It's because they're so social, you know?
They are.
Always eager to please, always up for a game, always want to be in the middle of the action.
And that's part of what makes them so charming.
Exactly. But all that enthusiasm, all that zest for life, it can sometimes, tip over into overstimulation, especially if we're not recognizing the signs early on.
So what does that look like in a Havanese? How can we tell the difference between their usual, playful energy and overstimulation?
You might see some rapid pacing, maybe more barking than usual, even a kind of frantic, almost hyper kind of energy that's different from their usual playfulness.
Okay, so it's like their off switch is broken.
Exactly. They just can't seem to settle down.
So in those moments, what can we do? What's the best way to help them?
The key is to remove them from the situation. Gently, of course. Find a quiet corner, maybe a separate room, where they can just kind of decompress for a bit. You could also try engaging them in something calming.
Like a gentle massage.
Yeah, a massage. Or even just speaking to them in a soothing voice. Sometimes that's all it takes.
Just that reassurance that everything's okay.
Exactly.
And this actually leads us perfectly into the next part of our deep dive, because speaking of helping our Havanese thrive, we have to talk about training.
Oh, yes. Training.
Because Havanese, they're smart cookies.
They are. Havanese are known for being very quick learners.
They really are. And they're so eager to please, so in tune with their humans, that training them can feel, honestly, more like a fun collaboration than a chore.
Totally. It's a partnership.
Right. And I think sometimes we underestimate just how much we can actually teach them. And I'm not just talking about tricks and commands,
right,
but about communication itself.
Yes.
Teaching them how to better communicate their needs and understand ours.
Absolutely. And one of the most valuable things we can do is reinforce their calm behavior. So every time your Havanese is relaxed, maybe just chilling out on the couch or sitting calmly next to you while you're working, those are all opportunities to reward them.
So we're talking praise, treats, maybe a little scratch behind the ears.
Exactly. Positive reinforcement goes a long way. It's so much more effective than just focusing on, correcting unwanted behaviors.
Right. We want to encourage those good vibes. And speaking of training, let's not forget about teaching them some specific commands like speak and quiet, especially if you have a Havanese who's prone to, alarm barking.
Oh, absolutely. That's a great one to teach.
It can be so helpful, right? Giving them an outlet for their barking, but also a way to control it.
Gives them a sense of, control over the situation. And you mentioned speak and quiet, and trainer Zach George actually has a fantastic method for teaching these commands.
He does. We'll make sure to link to that in the show notes for everyone listening. And finally, I think one of the simplest but most powerful things we can do to improve our communication with our Havanese is to really be mindful of our own body language.
Oh, 100%.
Because they are constantly picking up on our cues, even when we don't realize it.
They're like little emotional sponges, aren't they?
They really are.
Yeah.
If we're feeling stressed or anxious, chances are our Havanese is going to pick up on those vibes and, might even mirror our energy.
Absolutely.
But if we approach them with a calm, confident, reassuring demeanor.
It can make a world of difference.
Right. It's like we're having this nonverbal conversation all the time.
We are.
Even when we're not saying a word, they're reading us.
They're masters at it.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into, the amazing world of Havanese communication, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that these little dogs have so much to say if we just know how to listen.
They really do. It's amazing.
Those barks, those playful zoomies, those soulful eyes, it's all part of their language.
Their way of connecting with us.
It really is. So I hope that everyone listening today feels inspired to tune in a little more closely to their Havanese.
Me too.
Because the more we understand our communication, the stronger our bond with them becomes.
Absolutely. It enriches the relationship in so many ways.
It really does. And on that note, we'll let you go, but keep those tails wagging and those conversations flowing. Until next time.
The Havanese HQ podcast is a production of Havanese World and available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and Pandora. Gary Fujioka Sr. is the managing editor and executive producer.